Though most of the media seems to like Obama's new plan. Here's how NBC explains it.
Think of the internet as a sort of congested superhighway with most of the wider fast lanes taken up by big fat trucks carrying content like Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu. The FCC's new rule will mean those big companies will not be able to pay to dominate the fast lanes. The new FCC rules will also prohibit internet service providers like Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast from slowing down internet traffic and blocking access to competitors.
Yes, no blocking, no slowing down. It sounds great. I'd be more certain if we were allowed to read the 300-page rule, except they wouldn't allow us to see it. Of course, the FCC commissioners are able to read it, and fortunately one of them joins us now. Republican Commissioner Ajit voted against the new rule. Why?
First and foremost, there is no problem with the internet. The internet isn't broken today, as most of us who rely on it know. Secondly, decisions about how the internet works are now going to be made by bureaucrats and politicians instead of by engineers and innovators. And third, and most importantly to me, putting on my hat as a consumer, this is going to be a bad deal for the American consumer, especially rural and low-income Americans. It's going to mean higher prices for broadband. It's going to mean slower speeds, fewer competitive choices. This is a massive shift in favor of government control.
But you make it sound like you and your fellow commissioners are just out of control and you're going to jump all over the internet. The other commissioners say, oh, we're going to have a light hand. We're just going to punish somebody who does something wrong.
Do you trust Washington bureaucracy to get internet policy right? And we can only look abroad to places like Europe where utilities, where the internet is treated like a utility, to see that consumers are worse off, even though, and especially because, I would argue, government is so actively involved.
And yet there are so many smart people in the internet world who are just all for this. Small web companies like Tumblr and Etsy support government intervention. Etsy says the internet is built on the principle of openness. This democratic access allows Etsy sellers to compete with much bigger brands. The implication is without net neutrality, somebody will cut them off.
I certainly respect what they have done to build up their companies, but the problem is what they don't understand is the platform has to exist to allow them to innovate. And if we adopt these heavy-handed regulations that are going to dissuade some of the broadband providers from building their networks or upgrading their networks, then future Etsys, future Tumblrs simply won't have enough bandwidth, so to speak, to be able to deliver some of those innovative services to the American consumer. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of companies like Tumblr and Netflix now saying, whoa, these rules might not be exactly what we bargained for.
Also opposing you are Facebook, Google, Netflix, and President Obama. They say the internet is a public good and should be regulated like one.
I could not disagree more, and the best case I can make is the 2-decade experience we've had with the internet. It has thrived without the heavy hand of government regulation. Even if there were a problem with the internet, which there isn't, the common carrier regulations we just adopted are going to make it a lot tougher for broadband to be deployed to some of the most difficult to reach parts of this country. So ironically enough, the regulations we just passed, well, because if you are a provider and you have a limited amount of capital and the government says now we are going to, for the first time, micromanage how you deploy your network, what service plans you're going to be allowed to offer, and all kinds of different business practices might be under scrutiny now, you're going to be a little more careful about deploying some of that, or spending some of that capital to build out your network. You might not build it at all.
It ends the 2 decades of permissionless innovation. Now you have to say, Mother, may I? And that slows everything down.
Absolutely right, and I think some of the innovators who are going to, who have been pushing us to adopt these heavy-handed net neutrality regulations, ultimately might find themselves swept up in this regulatory vortex, where the agency, as a referee, might throw a flag on some innovative business plan they want to pursue.
Thank you, Commissioner Ajit.